Now Pedersen the blast. Oh, that hit Provorov. Diving save. Hart as he flashes across. Briere sets up Carl. Side of the net. Deflected. Score! Briere moving in. Stop. Cuts to the middle. Still has it. Shot! Score! Here's Hughes giving it across. Oh, save! Dave Backler! Got it to him. He's an angle. Short-handed mid. He scores! Up top, cruising is Provorov. He scores! Ivan Provorov!
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Flyered Up Podcast. I am your host, Amadeo Gracia, along with my partner, Chris Mayer. And also, we are joined by the Painted Lines Flyers writer, Tyson Quiabell. We are streaming live, as always, on the Painted Lines YouTube channel, also on TTP Sports and Flyers Fan Mania 93. And everyone, geez, we actually have some Flyers news to talk about. Something very, very exciting. Oh my God. It's felt like it's been ages since we actually get to talk about actual news, an actual signing, as Phil Myers re-signs with the Philadelphia Flyers. He signs for a 3-year contract worth $7.56 million at the annual value of $2.55 million. It's a great contract. I love the signing by Chuck Fletcher. Phil Myers is a Flyer for another 3 years. I want to hear your guys' thoughts about it. So I want to start with Tyson first, and then we'll go on to Chris. So Tyson, what are your thoughts about Phil Myers re-signing?
Yeah, I like the contract. Honestly, I think it's a good contract. I think it's one of those ones where they overpaid this year a little bit potentially, but the hope is that it pays off in years 2 and 3, especially with the salary cap being flat for the next, foreseeable future. Especially if he ends up playing top 4 minutes this season, which I believe is expected with Matt Niskanen departing, and with it kind of being undecided where Eric Gustafsson's going to play in the lineup, likely more on the third pairing. But Myers being able to play on the right side, there's been some talk about him maybe even starting on the first pair to start the year. But regardless, whenever you have a top 4 blue liner locked up for longer than a year at less than $4 million a season, that's a pretty good contract. So again, with Myers, it's one of those guys where you kind of we're still kind of waiting and seeing what his ceiling is. He's shown flashes of offensive brilliance. He showed that in the playoffs, and yet he's shown some defensive deficiencies kind of mixed in the middle there. So puts us in a position of hoping for the best, but overall, I don't think it's a bad contract. Even if there's a small amount of risk involved, I think it's a good contract for the Flyers going forward for sure.
And Chris, we're going to move on forward to you. What do you think about Phil Myers re-signing with the Flyers?
Yeah, personally, I like it. And I know it looked like I was on my phone a lot there. I was actually trying to find up the total salary for the contract, because it's broken down to where he'll get more starting off like throughout the year. So the total salary for 2020-21 is 1.3. So he's only going to get 1.3. So that's kind of where I'm going off Tyson's point, is that the hope is that he gets better, so he gets paid more as he grows into, his form and into, the top 4 defensemen the Flyers see him to be. I personally love it. I pretty much called it. I said 2 years, 2.5. I got 3 years, 2.55. So it's pretty much the same thing. I really do like the extra year added to it. I think that adds a lot to it as well. And overall, I think it's a great contract by Fletcher. I feel like all the contracts that he's given out have been pretty spot on. Starting from Provorov and connecting when they started in training camp last season until now, with the last one being Myers. So overall, I think it's a great deal, to be honest. I don't know if, Myers will play first pair. He can. I honestly think that's what the team thinks, and that's what the Flyers, the direction that they're going to go. I personally think it could be Sanheim, to be honest with you, but that's obviously a different topic. But overall, I think it's a great contract overall. But what are your thoughts on this deal?
Oh, I absolutely love it. I think, honestly, like what you guys were talking about, I do agree with that. They're planning on him trying to get better as the years goes on. That's the way his contract's going to be separated into those 3 years. I personally just love the deal in general. It's not an overpayment. I feel like it's perfectly for what he was. He's not getting what Sanheim's getting. I think for what he is right now, he wasn't able to put that much leverage because he basically only had, a year and a half, not even, in the National Hockey League. So he really wasn't able to get much argument for money-wise there. It's good to see him getting there. And I feel like he's going to take the next big step this year, because he's one of these guys is going to have to, because You lost Matt Niskanen. That's going to be crucial to the defense because that's just a harsh blow right there. No one expected that to happen. And a guy like Sanheim, a guy like Myers, one of those two was going to have to step up and possibly play those top minutes with Provorov. And that's definitely going to be something to look forward to going into the season. And talking about that defensive core, I want to get your guys' thoughts on, like, who do you think out of this blue line defensive core, who do you think is going to be that guy that takes the next step?
Toast, you want me to start with this one, or?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
All right. I personally think it could be Gostisbehere. I don't know if he's going to play, but if he does, I've said this so many times. I know I've said it before on here. And I know I've said it to you, Amadeo, but what they need to do with Gostisbehere is they need to have him where if he plays, he plays. He has to get minutes. I personally think he could play top four. That's the only way he gets confidence back is if you put him in the top four. Him playing a bottom pairing and fighting with Robert Hagg and Justin Braun all season is not going to help his confidence at all. I think they need to use him on power play in whatever way they can. If they incorporate him in the first unit, if they change that up, if they put him on the second unit, whatever. They need to use him where he plays, and if he messes up, he's out there the next shift, depending on the situation. If he has a bad game, he doesn't get scratched for 3 games. He plays the next game. The only way that he can regain confidence, which is what I think the problem is with him, is if he plays and he gets minutes. That's like the only solution, or unless he gets traded. I honestly think you could see something where if the Flyers want to move him at the end of the season, you might see a lot of him because they want to increase his value. Because honestly, his contract is not bad for his age and where he is and what he's done. He doesn't have a bad contract at all. It's 3 years left at 4.5. That's very movable in today's league. Now with a flat cap, it might be tough because you have to get the same contract back. But again, overall, I think it could be Gostisbehere to be one of those guys. I'm really curious to see how they use Gustafsson because it makes me think if they use him, obviously he'll be on the power play, but I don't know if they'll use him with a double defenseman power play or they'll use him as just a quarterback on the second unit, or they could even use him in the first unit. But overall, I think it could be Gostisbehere.
Yeah, I'd have to reiterate on that as well. I think I'm hoping that 1 year of Alain Vigneault is going to lead to more opportunities for Gostisbehere as well with Niskanen being gone. I mean, I loved watching him play in Union back when in his NCAA days. I mean, you just see him wind up from anywhere. He was just this very creative, offensive-minded guy, and he had a 65-point season, 3 years ago? So you still see that there was, there's obviously a chance that was a one-hit wonder sort of scenario, but we've seen throughout his career so far these flashes of brilliance. And I think that there's a really good chance we could see him slot in for higher minutes if he's given the ability to be himself in the system. That's been part of the problem. If you had him slotted as a third pairing guy playing limited minutes, depending on coaching strategy, he's a guy that you almost want to shelter in terms of defensive zone starts. Like you want him to be starting in the offensive zone with regularity for him to succeed. And the way that Vigneault is historically coached has not necessarily to use third pairing guys in that way, which is why we saw Robert Hagg sometimes go into the mix in particular. But it is going to be interesting to see what happens because, just looking at their depth chart, they have 7 defensemen locked up on one-way contracts right now. And so Robert Hagg is one of them, and he's at 1.6. And in general, in today's NHL, you're not paying your 7th defenseman $1.6 million. Usually those guys make below $1 million. It's rare that they make over that. So my thought is they're gonna give him an extended role, at least on the third pair.
Yeah.
I think a guy
he had too.
Yeah. And I think a guy that you mentioned Travis Sanheim, but he's someone that we've seen similar in moments to Phil Myers and Gostisbehere, where he's still on that developmental curve a little bit in terms of he still can hit his prime. And I think that we've just seen he's been known even in junior as a late bloomer. I mean, even when Hextall took him where he did, it was a situation where some people were like, oh man, we thought maybe he was going to be more of like a second round guy. But he has excellent wheels. Really great offensive instincts, highly, highly intelligent. He can make mistakes and make up for it with his speed. So He's someone I think that could easily play a top 4 role with high success next year.
Yeah, definitely. Just looking at the defensive pairings in general, when mainly they're going to be shaped out. Provorov, he's going to be your top pair guy. He's going to be the guy that's going to log every single minute possible, whether that's 5-on-5, power play, penalty kill. He is going to be your main guy. It's just right now that question mark right now is going to be who is paired beside him, because we all saw last year Sanheim and Myers, they were the third and fourth pairing. Those were the guys that always played with each other mainly, I would say, throughout the second half of the season. Because mainly through the first half of the season, you saw Alain Vigneault mainly scrumble the lines, trying to find some pairings that had some type of chemistry. And then when you saw Myers and Sanheim paired together, those were the guys that you found they had some sort of chemistry together. There were some bumps in the road because you're going to get that with young defensemen, but they found a way to find that chemistry. It carried on into the playoffs, and they played really well in the Montreal series. There were a lot of bumps in the road against the Islanders in the second round of the playoffs, but then they showed some spurts of their offensive ability, which I feel like that potential is only going to grow. I feel like especially with a guy like a Phil Myers, because I feel like his offensive upside, I feel like is more better than a guy like Sanheim. I feel like Sanheim's potential is more of a really good two-way type of guy. He can chip in offensively, but he can also play really well in his own defensive zone. So I feel like right now, if in terms of looking at the defense, and also going back to your point with Shane Gostisbehere, he does need to be more tampered into the top four role. You can't be playing him in the bottom pairing role, because if he's basically going to be playing with a pylon and Justin Braun, or I wouldn't say Robert Haig's a pylon, because Robert Haig, I do like what he does, but Justin Braun, I'm going to make fun of the guy as many times as I can, because even though he's at a really good contract, the more and more I see Justin Braun, it's just like, oh God. It's just like, I don't know. I don't want to rant about Justin Braun that much, but Shane Gostisbehere, he needs to be put in a position where he needs to get his confidence back. Yeah. And that's not going to be.
He has to put in a position to where if he messes up, he doesn't have to worry about constantly, what's going to happen after this play? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, what's going to happen when I go back to the bench? Like, he needs to, I mean, I've said this so many times, like, and that's like the only thing I can come up with at this point. I mean, my other guess is trade him, because if they're not going to use him, I don't want them to use, $4.5 million in a flat cap world when they could be using it right now, to try to get something back. I don't want them just to be sitting in the press box.
Yeah.
I'm sure
I mean, even between him and Haig, like that's, $6.1 million in cap space, right? Either in a third pairing or one of them being in the stands. And that doesn't even include Mark Friedman is on a one-way contract this year. And there's been talk from coach of management being like, we love him, we love what he brings. And they're kind of being supposedly this unwritten promise that he's going to potentially make the roster now.
Yeah.
With some of the new, the expanded rosters, there's been a rumor of potentially up to 26 guys of the taxi squad and all this stuff. It's likely Friedman's going to be on there anyway, but in terms of actual ice time, like that's a lot of money tied up in a potential third pairing between Gostisbehere and Haig. Yeah, in comparison.
Yeah, right. And I feel like another guy that not many people have talked about, I know we haven't mentioned him, is Doug Poyat too. Flyers only free agency signing. They could use him in a bottom pairing role. They said he could play, top minutes in the AHL if they even have a season, or he could, play bottom pairing in the NHL as he has before. So that is another option too. And I think at this point, going off your point with Freeman, I think the Flyers see him as an NHL defenseman now. So I think it makes sense if they were to use him, because we did see him. We did see him in the playoffs, right? Just the one game.
We saw him maybe just
the exhibition game, right?
I would say just the exhibition game. He didn't play anything against Montreal or the Islanders.
Yeah, that was just him and Zamula, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't remember who the other defenseman was. But yeah, I think you could see that as well. I mean, it's tough because you have, as you said, Tyson, you have so much money tied up in those guys. It honestly makes me think if they try to change certain things up on the power play too. Like, I wonder if they go with maybe Myers saying I'm on the top unit.
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
And then the other question is about Eric Gustafsson. He's not going to be a player that's going to be playing bottom pairing minutes. No, he's going to have to play top four.
Honestly, I'm not sure about that. I honestly think Gustafsson, I think at best is a 5. So that's where I kind of look at Ghost, and I'm like, you could put Ghost at the 4 or the 3 or the 4, no matter how, in just whatever way you want to put that. But then again, it's like, where do you fit in Hag and Braun? So that's why I'm kind of stuck at like, what do they do? Because it's like, I feel like they should use Gostisbehere, but they mostly won't. And then they're screwed then with Hag and then Braun. So like, it's not like Braun and them, want to be playing, X amount of games. I mean, it's already a shortened season to begin with. So not many of these guys want to be missing games and everything too. So
yeah, I think there's just going to be a lot of opportunity, honestly, for guys to work themselves in and out of the lineup, especially with an extended lineup, and especially with the Flyers not being in cap trouble, meaning like, even I believe Elliot Friedman said last week, like if they did go with the 20, I think they'll go with 23 plus a taxi or something like that, or 26 plus a taxi. But whatever's in the 26 has to be below the cap, and then the taxi squad would be against the cap. And for that reason, I think the Flyers do have a lot of flexibility there to give some guys opportunity as they figure it out. And I think there could be some healthy competition there, because you could have a guy like Pouliot, who is, like, I believe, an 11th overall pick by Pittsburgh. This was a while ago, like almost 10 years ago, struggled at the NHL level, but he's offensive minded and he moves the puck up the ice quick. You have a lot of guys on the Flyers in particular, with Gustafsson, Gostisbehere, Sanheim, Myers, Provorov, and then in the system potentially Zamula and Friedman. They're known for moving the puck up real quick. So they, depending on who kind of finds a niche and who Vigneault actually is going to trust on the defensive side of things, because a lot of these guys, that's their big stock, is consistency in the defensive zone. We could see a lot of guys move in and out, especially if it's a 56-game season, and if we start seeing what's happening in the NFL right now with, wide receivers playing quarterback because of COVID situations. We're going to see that in the NHL. We're already seeing in the World Juniors, where Sweden already lost like their top, basically 3 of their top 10 guys already.
I think they also lost a defenseman too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And USA today announced 2 guys got cut, one from the team last year, and originally it seemed surprising, and then they're reporting now that it wasn't performance related, meaning it's likely COVID related. So
Now I want to ask you this: are they able to announce if it's COVID or not? Because I know, with the NHL, they weren't allowed to announce it.
I believe they're leaving it up to players. Is kind of how they're doing it. So they're individually.
That's kind of what the NHL did too. Yeah.
Yeah, like Canada had a guy, Xavier Simoneau, who I'm a big fan of. It's been undrafted so far, and he got cut, and he came out just straight up and said that his lungs were at like 50% capacity after contracting COVID, and that's why he didn't make it. So he came right out. But yeah, they're kind of leaving it. And at least in the USA situation, it was 2 players that were roommates. So that's also why they're saying it was likely that. But again, at this point, it's speculation.
It kind of feels like what they're doing right now is they're just protecting the privacy of their players right now. Basically what the NHL did during the bubble situation. It's basically up to the player if they want to reveal that they had COVID or not, which is incredibly understandably why. That's personal privacy. You don't want to release that just because it's out there and people want to know. It's up to the player if they want to do that. And just we have people watching this episode right now. We have a couple of comments right here. Renee, let's go Flyers. Christopher, let's go Flyers. And Micah the Gamer, let's go Flyers. I like that. A lot of let's go Flyers right here. And we got a question right here from Christopher saying, what's more exciting, the Phil Myers re-signing or the Mighty Ducks getting rebooted on Disney Plus? That's a tough one.
Ooh.
I don't know.
It's funny too because Disney Plus, it was like, when was it? They announced like so many things that were going on, like that they're, I guess, starting projects, episodes that are coming out soon and stuff like that. I remember them talking about a bunch of the Marvel stuff. I honestly did not see that they were rebooting the Mighty Ducks.
I had no idea. I haven't been on Disney Plus in a couple weeks, but my excitement for Myers was pretty high, though. I will say that.
I feel like everyone was.
Yeah, I'm going to show my Canadian bias here. I was never as big of a fan of the Mighty Ducks as I thought I should have been, due to at the time the lack of realism I thought was present in the originals. But I did like the cartoon from the early '90s when they would fight aliens with hockey sticks, which is also on Disney Plus. So I would say Phil Myers, because I think, especially year 2 and 3, I think we're going to have a bargain contract here. So Disney Plus is what it is. Flyers are going to be in cup contention, I think, for a while here. So,
yeah, that's definitely the hopeful right there. We got some more comments right here. We got one again from Micah saying it's a good contract, and he also thinks that he should have gotten 4 years possibly instead of 3. That would be nice, but we can't be beggars. Beggars can be choosers. So I'm perfectly fine with him getting the 3 years right there. And Micah also states that he thinks Myers and Sanheim should remain the pairing going into next season. And honestly, that could be a possibility. We just never know what's going to happen going into the season. Never know.
Provorov and Justin Braun up there as your number 1.
Oh God, no.
Braun could be your number 2.
No.
Hanging around up there. Oh
no, I don't want that. That is probably the worst possible thing you can do.
No, but in all seriousness, could you guys see Ghost playing top pair with Provorov? Because when he played in 17-18 and had the 65-point season, he played with Provorov. And they could try to go back to that.
I mean,
not for like a long time, but maybe like a couple games, see how it does.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I'd be opposed to the idea because I think Provorov, his underlying defensively has gotten better. And some of that might be playing with Niskanen, though Niskanen's underlyings defensively were bad the last few years until he played with Provorov. So depending on how you kind of want to, interpret that, those underlying, I think that he could even him out pretty well at this point in his career. I mean, we're not talking like 21-year-old Provorov or 19-year-old Provorov that had a lot of defensive deficiencies. He's looking significantly better. He's getting better at picking his spots offensively.
He's a true number 1 defenseman.
Yeah, and a two-way versus just being offensive-minded.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because I feel, again, like Provorov got more of the harder minutes this year. I mean, he's averaged 20 minutes or more since he came into the league as a rookie. And again, I feel like and it's funny, to me, I think there's a lot of people out there that don't think that these guys will like take a jump. Like everybody's just gonna like stay where they are. I'm like, no, like I have a strong feeling that like Sanheim, Myers, Provorov, and more, and guys like Ghost and Hag as well. I think a lot of them will take a jump. I mean, we saw a lot of them last year take a jump. Why wouldn't that carry over? I mean, I feel like that could be one of the main reasons why, the Flyers could be deadly this year is because a lot of these guys can take jumps, and that's just not the defense. That's the offense. So
you can't baby these guys forever either.
No, you can't. You have to let them play.
Yeah, and one of the things that happens too in a flat cap world is like so often, especially with defensemen and goalies in particular. Thankfully, the Flyers buck the system on goalies, but players are really eased in to these situations when sometimes, like at the speed of the game, younger guys have that speed. Oftentimes, if they have like strong hockey sense, high on ice intelligence, like I'm questioning why not just throw them in, like just throw them to the wolves, like let them go. Doesn't work. You give it a 3 to 5 game window. You make changes. You have veterans in the lineup like a Braun or Hag if you feel more comfortable with that.
Right.
And but otherwise, I'm like, just throw them, man. Like if you have 3 solid offensive lines right now on the Flyers offensively, and just you got guys that can move them the puck. You gain possession. You hold possession for longer. You need to care significantly less about defending if you have the puck with a higher percentage of the ice time. So I think that utilizing that and just throwing them to the wolves is going to do a world of wonder for the Flyers.
Yeah, definitely. And we have more comments right here. Another one from Christopher right here saying, quack, 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 Mr. Quaibill. I'm sure, going right there with a Mighty Ducks reference right there. And then we have another question, which honestly is going to lead into our next topic right here. Comes from SensFan7. SensFan7 says, I'm hyped for the hopeful season to start on January 16th. And that ties into our next topic perfectly. So the next rumor date right now is what's being discussed is that January 13th, between that range, is going to be the new proposed start date for the National Hockey League. And I honestly, that they're getting closer and closer to talking about this, I feel like it's going to be sooner rather than later. We're going to hear that announcement saying that the NHL is going to start on so-and-so type of date. And maybe it'll be January 13th because right now that's the new set date like it was for January 1st, like a couple of weeks ago. Now that the 13th is the new set one, maybe we'll find out some news because it sounds like right now they're not talking about the money situation right now because both sides, they want to play. Yeah. It's just all determining on, I guess, the safety precautions and all that. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you think they're going to start on January 13th? What are your hopes? And Chris, I want to start with you on that.
I look at it like this: if they start January 13th, the deal has to be done by the end of this next weekend coming up.
Yep.
That's the only way it could happen. I mean, then if you don't, then you're giving them players either like a 10 or 12 day, break where it's like, are we playing? Are we not playing? It has to be done by the end of this week. As you said, with the financial stuff, that's already done. It's pretty much just the scheduling, the divisions, and all the divisions are subject to change. Because first, Pittsburgh will be in the Central, not with the Flyers. Now the Penguins are back in. It's rumored that Dallas and the Wild could flop again. St. Louis could go out and go to the Pacific or something. I don't even know. It's a whole mess right now. But overall, I frankly don't care how it's done. I just want there to be live games on TV. That's kind of my main thing right now, is that like I don't care how they do it or how hard it is. Just play. I'm at the point where it's like the owners. I was so annoyed because the owners were just whining and complaining the whole time. When you already agreed to something, you already agreed to the CBA, you already agreed with all that stuff. It wasn't a renegotiation. It was just, oh, we need more money, and they're like, no, that's not happening. And kind of to help out the players too, they actually talked about adding a little bump to the salary cap for this season in the next few years. Is that they might try to add a little bit to the salary cap. Now, $2 million might be a stretch. If you narrow it down and you do the math, which I'm not going to do on camera because who wants to look when you do math, but if you do anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million, that could be it. I think the max to add is $1.5 million, but that would also help out the Flyers a lot too. It gives them a little bit more breathing room. I mean, they're at 2.2 right now. $1.5 million, they'd be at 3.7. Is that? Yeah, my math is right there. It's a great high school education. But overall, I'm excited for hockey. I think it's time to drop the puck here, and I think it can happen. I think the biggest problem, as I said, is the divisions. That's going to be terrible because you have to play the same team X amount of times, and they've rumored, if there's 8 teams in the Flyers division, they'll play them 8 times each. And I'm like, well, that's 64 games then. There's only a 56 game season. How is that going to happen? It'd have to be 7. 8 times 7 is 56. So I'm assuming that the Canadian division would play everybody 8 times and everybody else would play them 7 times.
Yep.
Just be that one even because there's only 7 teams in the division. But I'm not too sure. I mean, it's going to be tough because there's going to be a lot of hurdles. We know that. I think they're going to try to get fans in there at some point. Like I know the Sixers, for example, in Philadelphia, they are starting the season without fans, and they're going to, go back and see if they can have fans, starting in the new year. That could be something for the Flyers in Wells Fargo Center. I'm not too sure. I think that's actually more on Wells Fargo Center if they're able to do it, not the city of Philadelphia. So they might be able to do that because I know, like Amadeo, I don't know if you know this or not. With the Eagles, was that like? So when they tried to get Eagles fans, and they had Eagles fans for a little bit for a few games, was that on the Eagles? They opened that, or was it the city that allowed that?
That was the city. I think the city in the state of Pennsylvania has more control of what happens with the indoor and outdoor arenas. Because if you look at in the NFL right now for the San Francisco 49ers, the city of Santa Clara, they banned any kind of athletic things for, I think, 3 weeks, and the 49ers are forced to play in Arizona for the next 3 home games.
Yeah.
Yep. The Sharks are in the same situation right now. The Sharks aren't even allowed to do training camp right now. They can't even get into their practice facility. So then that's one of the reasons why, kind of jump in on the start date is like if you're San Jose, they don't know where they're going to play next year. Like literally, they don't even think they can get in the practice facilities. So some of that is state related, but it looks like LA and Anaheim aren't as concerned. But in the city of San Jose and San Francisco area, they definitely have a lot stricter guidelines at the moment than other places would. So meanwhile, Dallas could probably have fans whenever it starts, but San Jose can't even get into their practice facilities. So Montreal in the Canadian division is the same. Montreal is not allowed to go into their practice facility currently. So they're even talking about what it might look like for them to play somewhere else in Canada, and trying to figure that out right now. So I think the January 13th is going to be a go. I think before I was skeptical, but now I think it is basically from 2 things. One, I got my my annual notice for my subscription renewal to NHL TV today. if you guys ever subscribe to that. So
Good
they send
little
me in.
details that just like that, like
Yeah, it was like this is going to auto renew January
Yeah.
10th, and you have until January 10th to cancel if you want to. I was like, oh, cool. But then the Leafs, for example, they were talking about releasing Nick Robertson, who was on Team USA last year for the World Juniors and played a few games for them in the play-ins and the bubble this last year as a 19-year-old. And the Leafs made the decision today to not officially release him based upon their confidence in the start date. So, because he's expected to make the roster in their taxi squad. So, I think that we are going to see them bump up on the 13th. I think they're going to have to work with different teams, like particularly right now, Montreal and the Sharks are the only two that I've heard are struggling to know where they're going to be able to play potentially. Everyone else seems like they're going to be able to make something work.
I believe Winnipeg and Arizona, you can throw in that mix, are teams that are kind of struggling to get into their practice facilities. But I also did see the Coyotes posted on Instagram a bunch of pictures of like guys like Stepan and on the ice and everything. But I'm not sure if that was recent or if that was like previous and they just posted it on their social media or whatnot. But I know I read an article from Elliot Friedman that there were a handful of teams, and as you said, Montreal and San Jose. I know Winnipeg was one, and Arizona kind of had it. In the article, I had a parentheses and a question mark next to it. So that's probably a yes or no at that point of when the article was written. But I feel like that's the thing. I think there's going to be a lot of hurdles with that stuff. And I wouldn't be surprised if teams had to share practice facilities if they're closer. Like if the Sharks had to go to LA or something, like that would just be weird. But they might have to make it do.
Yep.
And the one thing I saw with talking about the restart date is when the training camps specifically for what teams are supposed to open. So if we're starting on January 13th, it sounds like maybe around the January 3rd date, that's when training camp facilities, that's when teams can start doing their training camps. And then I think for the 7 teams that didn't make the bubble, that didn't make the playoffs, I think if this is the January 13th start date, they're allowed to go as early as the 28th for their training camps if they choose so, because that's optional right there for those teams. So that's going to be definitely, if we get that start date, I feel like that's because we're starting to see a lot of players come back into the town right now. You're seeing a lot of Flyers. They're practicing over at the skate zone currently. Provorov, we saw him a couple of times practicing there. I think Hart, he's not here yet, but I think he is eventually about to come back down to Philadelphia. I think Michael Raffle, when he was playing over in Europe, I think he was scratched for a couple of games.
He was.
So maybe he might be preparing to come back.
He only played 4 games. I think he actually had 3 points in 4 games. I think he had a goal, 2 assists. But, and then he was scratched, I think, for the last game. Just to go off your list, I think Albie Kupel, Lagzinski, Carson Twarynski, Sanheim, a couple other guys that I know that were there. Who was it? I can't think of it. Oh, Alex Lyon. He was another one. But there have been some guys that have been starting to come into Philly and just start to practice overall too.
Yeah, just looking at the season. So it was going to be 52 to 56 game type of season if that's going to be the confirmed date. And going on the division realignment, there's something really funny that I want to share with you guys in the comments because, Chris, you probably already seen this before. So I want to share my screen right here. So for the people that are watching right now with the comments section. So look at this right now. So we got ESPN, the worldwide sports leader in the world. So they've shown their division realignment. So let's look at these divisions right now. So we're going to start with the West. We got the Ducks, the Coyotes, the Avalanche, the Stars, the Kings, the Wild, Sharks, and Golden Knights. Okay, it looks perfectly fine there. The Central Division, the Blackhawks, Blue Jackets, Red Wings, Panthers, Predators, Penguins, that's weird, Blues, and Lightning. Let's go to the Canadian Division. It's going to be all the Canadian teams. Flames, Oilers, Canadiens, Senators, Maple Leafs, Canucks, and Jets. Okay, that looks fine. It's every Canadian team. The East, Bruins, Sabres, Hurricanes, Devils, Islanders, Rangers, Capitals. Wait a minute. Where are the Flyers?
They just forgot. I guess they think that Seattle's supposed to be the 31st team to come into the league because they skipped, the and it's funny because they have Pittsburgh, but they forget Philadelphia because they're, in the same state. I don't even know. That's terrible. Horrible.
People were roasting. I like Greg Wyshynski, but people were roasting him for that.
His tweet has the Flyers in it.
Yeah, but the
Hilarious.
screenshot didn't. So I recognized that right
I don't
away.
know why they'd be harping on him for that.
Yeah, I know, as if he was responsible for the graphic.
Right.
Just blame ESPN.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not his fault.
Right.
If you literally look up his tweet, he has all the teams are in there, all 31.
And I love the Flyers' little jab in the tweet right there. They have, since ESPN's known as the worldwide leader in sports, the Flyers just go the worldwide leader and they just don't even finish it.
Yeah.
Oh God, ESPN, the great old ESPN. Just forget the Philadelphia Flyers are probably the most hated team in the NHL. That's the conspiracy theory right there, and that's what
I'm
showed
telling
it.
you. I have a strong feeling that there's just like the narrative that like, oh, because he's a Flyer, you know what I mean? Like I just have that feeling, like guys that like for example, like Couturier a couple years ago, you know what I mean? Like there's just like that feeling that's like, oh, he's a Flyer, he won't win. And everybody just votes against him because he's a Flyer.
Oh God, that's just crazy. And we got some more comments right here. We got one from Sean's, basically for Tyson right here, saying he loves the old North Star shirt. So compliment right there for you, Tyson.
I'll take
and
it.
we got another question from SensFan7. He asked, "Do you think they will play in their home arenas? I heard they were talking about outdoor rinks too. I feel like that's going to be the most definite thing. They are going to be playing in their home arenas like the NBA is doing. The talks have been there about playing in the outdoor rinks. Nothing's going to be fully confirmed until we get the official start date, until what Gary Bettman says. Nothing's going to be official with the outdoor games and stuff like that until you get an official announcement. That'll be fun, honestly. And we've talked about this before in the previous podcast about the outdoor rinks. But Tyson, I want to get your opinion on if the NHL, if some of these teams actually do outdoor home games. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be dependent on what states are going to allow them to do in terms of fans. Like I know a lot of the places that were tossing around, it was like LA and Anaheim, which is kind of funny. I've been to LA and Anaheim both in January before, and it's not cold. So if you got an outdoor rink going on for there, you're investing a lot of capital in just maintaining, keeping ice, even comparison to inside. So I know from their vantage point, the thought was, well, I think they have some fans, or at least they did for a while. They're like USC football. I'm not sure about UCLA, but there was an idea there that maybe the state of California would allow them to have some fans. And NHL in comparison to NBA, even and NFL, like NFL alone could, if they wanted to, league-wide, be like, we have no fans, but revenue off of ads alone, basically.
Right.
We'll make money. NHL is not that way, especially as much as we look at LA and say it's a big market. The Kings are not a big market team. The Ducks aren't a big market team. They're a very kind of niche, like, fan base that supports them. Like a close friend of mine lives in LA. Used to always say, "Yeah, the LA Kings get 18,000 fans. That's because there's only 20,000 of them in the whole city." No knocking LA Kings fans. That being said, like it's obvious if you followed hockey in California, it's a niche crowd. It's not the number one sport in either of those markets, and so if they were to go outside, it's because they need revenue, and most teams are anticipating potentially we're moving on the tens of millions in deficit for this year. So if you're a team that's struggling, I think that's why they're considering it. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I see it like that. Like I actually heard the other day that they might try to do ads on the helmets.
Yep.
For the season. They're going to do everything they can to get money. Just with if they do that, the reverse retro jerseys, if they do the outdoor games, what does that lead them to do? Make more jerseys. But could you honestly see some teams, like for example, the Ducks you just mentioned and the Oilers, they already have 5 alternate jerseys for this year. They have the reverse retro, they have 2 alternates, and then they're home and away, both teams. If they were to play an outdoor game, I don't know, just say it's
6 jersey.
Yeah, could they have 6 jerseys in one season? Could you in 56 games, you have to wear 6 jerseys? Could you imagine that? Like that's insane. I mean, and it's the same like with the Flyers. I mean, they have the 4 jerseys, and I mean, again, like it makes me think how they do that with the reverse retros. Like, how many games do they wear them? Because if they're promoting them so much and they make the whole merchandise brand, I can't see them only wearing them 4 or 6 games. It's got to be close to 10 or 12 is what I'd have to think.
Yeah.
If they promote them like that. I mean, I don't know, but they're going to do everything they can to get money. It's the same thing with like the TV stuff. I would actually love for them to do – I've actually talked about this before with Wallach from Flyers Nitty Gritty, how they could do something with the NHL Game Center too, and try to make that where maybe you just give us more to watch and you up it by, I don't know, $5 for the subscription. You add more money to it, and it could be more of a bargain where you try to make more money through there while maybe you give like the playoffs included with the regular season. I don't know. I don't really know how it works, but just a thought with that, they can maybe try to add more money or something. But I mean, overall, I think it's tough because they're going to run into a lot of hurdles with that too, because it's like, how do they try to navigate around this stuff? But overall, I think they'll probably do a pretty good job with it.
Yeah,
that's why they're not. That's why they're not bubbling either, because so many of the smaller market teams have like arena sponsorships, right? Like you'll see the names like you usually talk about with Philly Wells Fargo Center. Smaller markets in particular, like they get a lot of revenue from those companies, and contractually, those companies are putting some pressure on the organizations, being like, "Hey, man, we're paying you guys how many millions a year to have our name on your building, and you're not even playing in your building. There's not fans there. I mean, you say our name as much as possible. It just doesn't have that sort of value there that the people thought." So there's also corporate pressure big time on especially smaller market teams. And I do think we'll probably see something similar to NFL where, like Nashville, I'm assuming like they did just do a harsher lockdown recently, but wouldn't surprise me that if they see a dip in cases, if they have in-person fans again. Florida is just Floridaing this thing, so they're going to be able to have fans, I'm sure, in both Tampa and then Fort Lauderdale. And but Canadian teams in particular, I don't think any of them are going to have fans this whole year. Most of the West Coast teams, most of the East Coast teams probably won't either. So time will tell, but I know that they're going to have to get creative, and I think that's something that I hope the NHL dives into, because that's something that they've been reluctant to do. I mean, I think their willingness to get creative with their product more or less has just been allowing HBO in the past to follow them around during Winter Classics and post Ilya Bryzgalov talking about Bears. But I think that there's potential
there
and
all that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's definitely potential there for big marketing opportunity here, especially if you're like me sitting around at home. I'm like, I want hockey right now, like for real. Like on a Saturday like today, like my TV would have been on all day long. Like my kids would have been running around in jerseys, just like watching in the background, pretending to be the people on the television like they do with anything Marvel related. And we don't have that. So I'm just like, let's go. Let's get this rolling. I think it is good for psyche, even for the general public. I think it'll be good, and I do think they will get it rolling here by the 13th.
Yeah, and just one last thing. I know it was reported the other day that they might actually purchase a vaccine, the NHL, to try to limit the cases spreading. Now, I don't know how true that is and if they're able to do it, but I know there might be some talks with other leagues too, like the NBA and maybe the NFL if they do it for going into the Super Bowl and stuff. I'm not too sure if they'll do that, but that could be another thing too, because it makes me think how much that would cost them as well.
Probably a ton.
Yeah, especially when you're buying it when it's not even released to the general world yet, and you're buying it or like that. So that might be tough, but I'm not 100% sure if that will even happen or not. But
yeah,
it'd be close to $1 billion, I bet.
Yeah,
at least.
Yeah.
It's going to be a weird time because it's funny thing. Just going back to like talking about like playing in their home arenas, Chris. This is more of like a nitpicky right now. It's just like, in my own opinion, right now, it's just I don't know. I feel like I'm getting tired of the name Wells Fargo Center. I kind of miss the old Wachovia Center name. I don't know why.
You don't like the nickname the Farg? The Farg is great.
They just need to name it after. They just have to name it after Wawa. Wawa's gonna get in there.
Yes, that would be the perfect sponsor.
The Wawa Center.
Yes,
that's got a great ring to it.
And you have Wawa all across the arena. That'd be amazing. I am perfectly sold on that.
Just get rid of every food. Everything in there. The
Wawa.
only thing that they keep is just beer, Chickies and Pete's, and then Wawa. Everything.
Yes. You could keep the Shake Shack too. The Shake Shack's nice.
Yeah, Shake Shack. Yeah,
all concessions can just be Wawas. It'd be fine.
Yeah. And it's funny because I love going in there. I love seeing like the small Chick-fil-A stand that sells just the sandwich for $6.50. Just the sandwich. That sandwich is like $2 at an actual Chick-fil-A, but it's $6.50 for just the sandwich at Wells Fargo Center.
And then you have to pay over, I think, like $10 now for a slice of pizza. That
Yeah.
gigantic Lorenzo slice
it's
of
going
pizza.
down in size. If you like, I remember it. It's going down in size every year, and they chart like. I used to get so mad when I would go there, and I would go to get the souvenir cup, and they had this cup, right? The Wells Fargo Center cup. It was I had like the most like dull smile on my face when I'd see this. I'd be like, great. I was hoping they give like one of these, like, you know, just like one of the ones that had the all the players on it. No, the Wells Fargo Center. That's great.
That was the cup when they just ran out of ideas.
Yeah, that was the cup where if they didn't have Flyers cup, they gave that one. I was like, oh, that's great. That's great.
Oh God, that just makes me flash back to when we actually were able to go into the arena. Geez, oh my God, the expensive food.
Yeah, $11 beers doesn't seem so bad anymore.
Yeah. And how much for crab fries again? For
They're
chicken?
like $11.50, I think.
Jesus Christ!
And the best is they give you one cheese cup. One, just one.
Don't you have to pay extra for another one?
Yeah, I think it's like $1.50 for one cheese cup for an extra. I'm like, oh my God.
This is how long it's been since we've been to the arena. I'm completely forgetting everything that's inside of it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, literally, there's nothing I love more than going to a Flyers game. The amount of money you can spend, and it makes me think too, like back, not this past summer, the summer before, my dad had got these Phillies tickets through work. I know this is kind of off topic, but
we're completely off topic right now. I don't mind that.
It came with the tickets and then like a bunch of food vouchers and stuff. And I'm like, so everything in total came out to be like $300 for the four of us, but we had all the vouchers and everything, so it wasn't a big deal. But it was like for the food, came at like $96. That's $100 right there just on food. Okay, the tickets were $25 each. There's four of us. Okay, so that's $100. And then, you know, I can't remember what else specifically that we bought. I can't even speak, but it's just like how much money these people drop on sporting events like a Phillies game and everything. It's like you can't even take your family out anymore because everything is so damn expensive. Like and then like then you got to pay to park, ice cream, like whatever else you want to get. I mean, I don't know. I just that's one of the things that just annoys me with that stuff is that it's all so expensive, but it's completely understandable though.
There's been whole books written about that recently, about MLB in particular, about how they don't even need full stadium. They don't need full stadiums anymore. Like businesses have moved beyond that, like professional sports franchises has. Because this reminded me of my last NHL game I went to in person was 2018 in Nashville. And I got to be in a corporate suite with a friend, and they provided snacks, but I came straight from work and I was starving and needed more than just like popcorn. So I went down. I walked around the whole arena in Bridgestone to try to find something, and the cheapest thing that I could find was $12. That wasn't like like a thing of popcorn, or something like a basic, like you said, like a Chick-fil-A sandwich type of deal. It's $12. So had I actually paid for my whole experience, including parking, we were lucky. We were in a corporate suite. It would have cost us a couple $100 as well. So I don't miss that part. Though I miss the in-person games, that is for sure.
Dude, there's no better feeling than just seeing a goal like happen live. Like you just see the play develop, and then like the goal horn and everything, and then you high five like the random like four guys behind you. It's great.
Yeah, I have one quick story before we get into our last topic here. So I think this was during the 2018-2019 season. Me and my father went out to LA to visit my sister who's living out there right now, and we decided to plan the trip on a weekend that the Flyers played the Los Angeles Kings. So we flew out there. They played on a Thursday, so we flew out there Thursday morning. We got into the hotel. We hung out with my sister the entire day. Then we went to the game, and also one of my other cousins that lives out there. So we went to the game, and it's Staples Center, great experience. And then I look at one of the food stands. Okay, it's McDonald's. Okay, you look at McDonald's right there, and guess how much the prices were for McDonald's?
At least $10.
Yeah.
$10 for a sausage McMuffin.
Oh my
for
God.
Sausage
That's worse.
McMuffin, $10.
Isn't a McMuffin on the dollar menu?
Yes.
That's worse
Holy
than the
hell.
airport.
Wow.
I didn't buy anything, thankfully, from that McDonald's. I think for that game, I bought I forget. It's not Annie Ann's from like our area. I forget what the Los Angeles version of Annie Ann's is called. I think it's like one of their rivals. I completely forget what it is, but like I saw said $10 for a sausage McMuffin. I just like almost had a heart attack right there. I'm like,
How much
what?
is a Big Mac? $30?
Probably. I don't remember.
Oh my god.
The only thing that stood out to me was sausage McMuffin, $10. I was like, okay, I'm not looking at the rest of the menu. Oh my goodness, that was one hell of an experience right there. And looking at some of the other comments that we have right here, we got one from Ed saying, going back to your Phillies comment, Chris, talking about the Phillies let you bring food and drinks in.
That is my dad, if anybody's wondering. Yes, they do. That is a good point. They do let you bring in usually me and my dad bring in like the 2-pound bag of peanuts, and we have like peanut shells up to our kneecaps by the time like the third inning rolls around.
Nice.
And we also have another question right here from Chris asking, are there going to be any surprise players making the roster this season? So
I've been waiting for you to bring this one up.
I got two.
I got two as well. I got Patrick and Kasha. Those are my two guys I think will make it this year. Well, make it. Patrick, I think obviously the biggest thing is that he's healthy, right? I know we've talked about it before. If he's there and he's able to play, he will play. That's how he rolls. I've said it before. He's not a holding hands coach. Seen it with so many guys: Voracek, JVR, obviously Goss to spare. I feel like overall, I think Patrick can play. If he's healthy, I think the Flyers are going to rely on him because I look at it like this: like he is an NHL player to them, and he's already put up 30 points consistently in NHL twice. He's been on some okay Flyers teams, some decent Flyers teams, and I feel like overall, I think he could really boost the lineup. To be honest with you, he's going to play with good players. I think overall he's going to have some very good line mates, and I'm very excited to see him. Basically tell everybody to go pound sand because that's pretty much. I don't think there's been really any positive, a real positive, I guess, a reassurance, I should say, for Patrick because really, I mean, everybody's pretty negative towards the guy. He's called a bust, every couple minutes or so. But overall, and just to go off Kasha too, I love Kasha. I think he could be a very solid NHLer one day. He's actually playing. He was playing in. I think it was the Czech League, the DEL, and he was playing really good. I was actually playing center over there because he's one of the best players over there. And again, I think last year we saw him in a handful of games. He scored his first NHL goal. I actually saw 10 rows above me, which was awesome. But overall, I think those are my two guys, Patrick and Kasha. I think we will see Frost too. I don't want to make it like I don't think Frost will play. We're going to see Morgan Frost. It's just, do we see him at the start? We know we're going to see him. We just don't know when. It's going to be the start, middle, and a couple games in, whatnot. Especially with the shortened roster and everything, he definitely will be on that expanded roster if they do that for this upcoming season.
Yeah, Tyson, what are your surprise players for the roster?
Yeah, my two are Tanner Lazinski and Wade Allison. And so Lazinski's a name which may not be super familiar to Flyers fans. He always makes my top 10 Flyers prospects has the last couple of years, but he's finished 4 years at Ohio State as their captain and is a really strong two-way guy, strong defensive player, strong penalty killer. And so he's a little bit older. Like I believe he's turning 23. So Vigneault likes a little bit older, more veteran style players. Mm-hmm. And so I think that he's a perfect fit for kind of a surprise. It might be like, oh, wait, who's this guy in the fourth line? He can also play all three forward positions. He can play both wing and center. So, and Wade Allison's my second one. Some people call him Scotty Hartnell light. Scotty Hartnell is, beloved amongst the Flyers fan base. Allison's not a redhead, but he plays a similar style. So we say poor man's is in his offensive upside is a lot lower. But again, he's played 4 years at Western Michigan, was their captain for 2 of the seasons, and he just is a strong two-way guy, but he also just has strong work ethic. So if the Flyers are looking for competition, third and fourth lines, I think those guys could be a surprise where you might look at the opening night roster and be like, wait, who's that guy? Later round draft picks kind of bumped in there. So Yeah.
I honestly feel like it could be similar to Bunneman and Torensky making the team out of camp to start last season. Everyone is like, wait, why aren't Farabee and Frost on this list?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this the right one? I'm like, and everyone's like refreshing. But yeah, and Tyson, I want to ask you this. I honestly think Legzinski, he really reminds me of Scott Lawton. He's just like that gritty player that can play really like he took a while to develop. And as you say, obviously with Legzinski being older, Lawton took forever to develop. I mean, he drafted in 2012. The Flyers wanted him up. Hextall was like, no, send him back down. And he was up and down constantly. He got like fourth line minutes. And then he finally, this year, from 17-18 on, he's going up in goals each year. He had 10, 12, and 13 this past year. He actually missed a lot of games this year. He only played 49 games, and he actually was a career high in goals. So that's telling you how good Lawton has been, and how consistent he's been too with guys like Hayes and Konechny, who he played with for a majority of the season. But just to go off Legzinski, he really reminds me of Legzinski, or he reminds me of Lawton. Excuse me. I feel like overall, like for example, Legzinski is a great shot. Like that's one thing I've always seen him in. He's an unbelievable, wrist shot, snapshot, whatever. And I feel like he could be a good presence on the power play too.
Yeah, he's a guy that does like, I wouldn't say he has like one standout thing about him. Like that's what makes it a little bit harder sometimes to prospects like him,
like
where you're like, he just does. Yeah. He might be like average or slightly above average in some things, but overall, he just has a really good on ice presence. He always knows where everybody is. He plays with a high motor, so he's just always kind of buzzing around somewhere a lot, and for sure. And yeah, I mean, I think that he's someone that has been underrated. I was glad the Flyers did lock him up. I know there was some thought maybe he'd test free agency after completing the 4 years NCAA, kind of like Kalanick did, signing with the Hawks. But I believe the Flyers at least told him, there'd be opportunity. And I think he looks like a penalty killer, bottom six guy. Maybe not. If it's not next year, it's for sure, I believe, the year after. So we'll see how that transition goes to NCAA. But I think he's one of their more underrated prospects in their system for sure.
Yeah, just looking at some prospects that we should be talking about right now. So going into this year's World Juniors, 3 Flyers prospects have made the World Juniors, 2 of them for Team USA, which are defenseman Cam York and forward Bobby Brink. And then you also have for Team Sweden defenseman that the Flyers drafted in the second round of this past draft, Emil Andre. So I want to get your guys' thoughts about this going into the World Juniors. So what do you think, what are your expectations, especially looking at guys like Brink, Cam York, since those guys have played in the World Juniors last year? What are your guys' expectations of them? And looking at Emil Andre, since this is going to be his first year playing World Juniors, if it's going to be a bottom pairing role, a 7th defenseman type of role, what are your guys' thoughts? So, Chris, I want to start with you first.
Yeah, I mean, kind of just start off with Andre. It's been rumored he could be like a 7 or 8, and that's what I think he'll be. I mean, he's the youngest defenseman for Sweden, so it makes sense. Kind of similar to York last year, he was injured, and he was also the youngest defenseman, and he was, the second unit quarterback for their power play, his youngest defenseman and being injured. But just to go off of York too, I think he's going to take a huge jump with USA. I have to think he's in their top 2 for defense. Have to think he's the number 1 power play unit, quarterback, because again, as I said last year, he's injured and he's the youngest defenseman. He played second unit. How could he not play first unit this year? I know USA has some very good defense, but overall, I think York is the guy to really take a jump there for USA. And I also think too that overall, his game, like from what I've seen, he is so like he's just so poised and he's so calm because he can be, and like it's really only hurt him maybe once or twice. He had a rough game a couple weeks ago versus Penn State, and it was kind of like he didn't play terrible, but he was just a little too. He was just real calm in ways that I didn't want him to be, but he's able to, and it kind of cost him a little bit. But overall, I think he, for the games that I saw from him with Michigan, he looked very good. As I said, he's very poised with the puck. He can move it really well. He really doesn't need a long time to think. I mean, once the play is there, it's there. He's put in a lot of bad positions, I will say, and he really recovers well. If he has turnovers, he recovers greatly to where it doesn't necessarily matter. The play is essentially that at that point, and any negative thought that comes into my mind, oh, it's a turnover, it's just completely gone because the way he recovered was just so good that it's like, But overall, I think he's going to have a very good tournament, and I feel the same way with Brink. He played first line this year, and I believe 2 or 3 games with Denver. He actually might have played more than that, but overall, I think Brink has played very good too. I saw Brink last year, and I thought he was one of USA's best players, and that is not biased. And that might be hard to take it that way, but overall, I mean, I was really hitting on him as I was watching. But again, I thought Brink was very good last year. He made a lot of smart plays to where he's smaller, but he's so aggressive defensively. It really helps him offense. And I think overall, I thought he had a really good tournament last year. I think he will this year as well. But I think it's going to be a really good World Juniors, and it sucks because we could have maybe seen Zamula because now they changed the rule and now he's too old now, which sucks. But we could have saw Forrester and Millman, but Millman gets sent home due to COVID protocol. And Forrester was one of I believe the second of the final cuts for Canada, or he might have been the final cut. I don't remember, but overall, I think it's still going to be a pretty good tournament regardless, even though there's only 3 players to where compared to 2017, the Flyers had 9. So it's tough, but I think overall it's going to be a really good tournament, Flyers-wise.
Yeah, and I think with the Flyers in particular, a lot of their players are getting older, as we've seen. So it's a combination of a guy like Frost obviously being a little bit older, and some of those other guys in the system kind of graduating into the 20-21-year-old range, and the Flyers having less picks, than in years past as they've kind of accelerated the rebuild the last 2. But yeah, I mean, I think as much as I'm not surprised that Forrester was a cut, it's still a little bit disappointing. Like, you want your first rounders, if they can, to play in that tournament. It's the best of the best. And I thought he had a chance as maybe a power play specialist. His biggest attribute is his shot. He's an NHL caliber shot already. So there was a thought there, especially in a tournament with international rules, to play an extra forward, an extra defenseman in their dress lineup. Then maybe they would just utilize him as that extra forward and use him primarily on the power play. But I think Canada, as we know, every year Canada is so stacked. Kirby Dach will be playing in their top 6 who played on the Blackhawks last year as an 18-year-old, and Dylan Cousins, who is expected to play top 6 role for Buffalo this year as an 19-year-old, will be in their top 6. So you got NHL caliber players that they, I think, can assume that position. So I think that automatically put Forster a step back, and it wouldn't surprise me next year if we see him in that lineup. But in terms of the 3 guys the Flyers have, I mean, Cam York's had a good season. He's an offensive defenseman. He's power play quarterback, kind of like you said, Chris, and I think that he will find himself in that role as well. I think we will see him play a top role. Looking at the depth chart, he's a year older. He's had experience in the tournament. I think that coaches will rely on him more heavily to play more, even 5-on-5 minutes. So he's someone we can keep an eye on for a big tournament. I think he could even be consideration for top offensive defenseman of the tournament in terms of points. I think we could put him in that category based upon both his skill set and what he's done at Michigan this year. Bobby Brink, I think, will probably play more like a third-line role, would be my guess for USA, based upon guys that are considered probably higher on the offensive ceiling side of things. But he's a player that you can never bet against. I mean, I was a huge fan of him in his draft year before he was drafted by the Flyers. He's legendary for playing and scoring a championship-winning goal on a broken foot in the U.S. Hockey League, just pushing through it. And so that's kind of been his MO. He's small, has a heart of a lion, and so there's a reason why he can make a World Junior team like USA and just play anywhere. So he could play on your top power play unit, and is offensively skilled enough he wouldn't look out of place. He can also play your penalty kill and play in your third and fourth lines and not look out of place either in a tournament like that. So I think that we'll see him play probably more of a depth role, but I think he'll be given opportunity depending on, if there's injury or special teams, things of that nature. And with Andre, it'll be interesting to see what he does in this tournament, because I'm a fan. I actually had him ranked higher on my draft board than I had Forster this past year. And he's kind of crazy a little bit in that he will throw these huge open ice hits, but he's only 5'9", and so he's kind of a high risk guy in some moments. So I think he'll be a Flyers fan favorite when he makes it. But he also has a lot of risk to his game. So Team Sweden just literally got a new coach today because their other coach tested positive for COVID. And so we'll see what that coach does with this roster. He's completely unfamiliar with. I think it's a complete toss-up. Though I think it's their under-18 coach. Andre would have played for him in some tournaments potentially last year. So there's maybe some familiarity there. But if he does get to play minutes, Flyers fans, is worth watching Sweden games because you'll see someone get, knocked out flat potentially with him on the ice, especially in a tournament. I mean, if you guys watch World Juniors, I love World Juniors because it's what the NHL used to be. Yeah. It's just I love it because you see these huge open ice hits in World Juniors. It's highly physical. These kids have nothing to lose. It's what the NHL of the 80s and 90s used to look like in some ways to me, and I love it. I don't miss a game. I record every game I miss, and I'll even watch like Slovenia play like Ukraine or something.
Yeah,
depending on the year.
Usually, back when they were able to have fans. I say back, I make it like it's 10 years ago.
It feels like that, though.
Yeah, I know. When they're actually able to have fans, they would have those games, and there'd be like nobody in the crowd. And then you get like in Canada, USA, it's like completely sold out.
Yes, it's always fun. I got
to go to the World Juniors back in the lockout year 2004, 2005 when Crosby played in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and it was a sellout in that arena. I mean, we couldn't move. It was mostly Canadian fans at that. I mean, it was a Canada game that I was at, but it was insane. It was so much fun. It was one of my favorite memories of hockey games I've been at, just in terms of atmosphere. And that was back when, Crosby, Bergeron, Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, Ryan Getzlaf, Dion Phaneuf, Shea Weber. I mean, it was a beyond stacked group of players.
I believe Canada won gold that year.
Ovechkin, Malkin for Russia. Yeah, they did, and they beat Ovechkin and Malkin in the final. It was incredible. So that's usually the one everyone compares it to. This year's won't be that level of talent, but it's still going to be a deeper tournament than most years because of the NHL not running as it is.
I feel like that's one of the things I want to cross off my bucket list. Just go to one of those, maybe like it's a World Junior tournament, Olympic tournament game. Just watch like a Canada play something and just like get the feeling from the Canadian crowd. I feel like that's just something like you don't feel at an NHL game. It's just like that I guess that extra level of intensity that you get from those international tournament games is something that the NHL maybe doesn't have just yet. That's like one of the things I do want to cross off my bucket list right there. And we do have a couple of more comments right here before we end off the show. So we got another comment right here from Chris. There's a lot of Chris's in this comment section.
Including me, too.
Including you, Chris. So Chris O asked right here, when will the Flyers get a natural goal scorer? He believes he's been waiting for that for 20 years. And hopefully that eventually happens. Are there any guys on this roster that you guys could believe could become a natural goal scorer? Because those guys are rare and they don't grow up trees.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe TK. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure if I even would classify Connecting as a goal scorer.
Yeah. I mean, I think of 30-goal guys right now. I mean, the Flyers are kind of a score-by-committee crew. I mean, if I look at who they have this year, I'm like, Drew's probably between 20 and 30. Coots is between 20 and 30. JVR just won his career 20 and 30. Kenke 20 and 30.
I kind of think Fairby could develop
in terms of there actually being, yeah. Maybe, I mean, I see him more as like a 25 ceiling guy. I could be wrong, but oftentimes, especially with the Flyers picking later as they are, they've been, even in their rebuild, they haven't had, other than Patrick, they haven't had like a top 5 pick. I mean, even Provorov, I believe, was 9th, right? So
7.
Or 7, excuse me. Yeah. So there's a sense of, they haven't had an opportunity to take a swing on a guy like a Patrick Laine.
Right.
or or
It's so
even
funny
like
you
the
say
Leafs
his name,
without
too.
Matthews.
Yeah,
It is
it's
very
so
funny that you
funny.
say his name.
Yeah,
because,
because it's
because,
yeah, right.
because
I
we
don't
got a
know.
comment right here from Sean saying, "Screw it, shock the world and trade for Line." Oh God.
I think he would honestly frustrate Flyers fans to know
My
like beyond
my
reason
biggest
too,
gripe with
because
that is that they say, oh, well, they should trade for Konechny. But then they want to say that the Flyers should get better at defense. Well, Konechny is better at defense than Line is. So I don't understand. So yeah, sure, we're gonna trade a guy because he didn't score in the playoffs for Patrick Line when he was your only All-Star this season, had a breakout year, was phenomenal. He's a fan favorite. Everybody loves him. And why would they trade Konechny, especially when essentially points wise, I feel like he's turning into a young Giroux. Points wise, again, I reiterate points wise because I don't want people to think I called him, Claude Giroux. And it's the same thing last week when I had mentioned York, and I didn't want people to think I said that York was Lidstrom. It's just what I see for my eyes. But overall, again, I mean, I never understood that because it's like, sure, let's trade for a guy that you're gonna have to give up so much for. They probably want a guy like Konechny. They probably want Sanheim. They might have even asked for Sanheim and Myers. They could have asked for both because that's how desperate they are for defense over in Winnipeg. I mean, they could have asked for a huge package, and I don't think it made sense for the Flyers at all.
Yeah, I think the Jets want defense as well because they have a decent top six even without Line in it. So they really need some defensive help after losing, the last Bufflin and Trouba in the same year. So I think that's what they're looking for. Yeah, and Myers, yeah. And I think the Flyers are just lacking the defensive depth to provide that piece that isn't going to take a huge chunk out of their roster. And Line is like, I like Line, but he's an extremely frustrating player at times because he's a streaky goal scorer and he doesn't have the defensive numbers to justify like some of the streakiness and moments. So there's times when I know like you can watch him play games and he'll go 9 games without a goal. And then you'll ask the question, like, what does he contribute outside of that, right? And at this point, we can say not a lot. Other guys in the league that are goal scorers, like Ovechkin, he's physical. He's going to pound guys. Matthews has strong underlying defensive numbers. He can go 10 games without a goal, and you still notice him, and Line can disappear. Yeah. So I think he would be a huge frustration for Flyers fans if they did give up a huge package for him. So he might get you 40, but you might hate him for 39 games.
And we have another comment right here from Ed asking, how long do you think it will take before the Flyers sign Bobby Brink to a contract or before Brink is on the Flyers? So how long do you guys think that will happen?
I'd say maybe probably 2 or 3 years. I'm not too sure. I mean, I think he'd probably need another year of college, to be honest with you, and then at least a year down in Lehigh Valley. So I'd have to think maybe 2 or 3 years. Just kind of overall, I mean, I think it's tough because, I mean, I look at like guys like that, they have to grow into their form, and I think that's another guy that you could see really grow into his form too, and Brink. But I'm just not too sure kind of how the Flyers see his development. I also think there's a lot of guys that might be in the way of Brink as well. That it might be really tough for him to compete for a roster spot with all the talent the Flyers have. So, I mean, I'm not too sure. I mean, and again, that I don't want to, just harp on Brink either because I think he could take a massive jump as well. But I feel like 2 or 3 years is probably what I'm hoping from Brink.
Yeah, I think 2023 probably 2023, 2024 would be when we see him. So a little bit of a late bloomer. He'll probably play 3 years at Denver, at least 1 more year at Denver, probably 1 in the AHL before we see him. That's my guess.
Yeah, and honestly, I think if you see him with the Flyers after that 1 year in Lehigh Valley, he could even split and play half Lehigh Valley or play, some games with the Phantoms, get called up and then go back down. Could be something like that too.
Yeah, I could definitely see something like that. And we have our last question right here before we end it off. This comes from Sean. Do you think the power play will continue to be poor, or can it improve exponentially with what we have currently? What do you think? I don't think the power play is going to be as bad as it was during the playoffs. That was just an odd stretch. There were so many months off. It's just that power play during the playoffs wasn't the real power play.
Yeah. I look at it like this. Like every year there's always that one thing that like the Flyers are always bad at. And then the next year it's fine. They're just good again at it. If you look at 18-19, right? How many games did they lose at home that year?
Too many.
Way too many, right? And a lot of them were afternoon games, right? That whole thing with the schedule. This year, amazing at home. Amazing. They won like 27 games at home, something like that, right?
I think close to that.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, they were unbelievable at home. They only had like 3 or 5 like regulation losses at home the whole season and all the 69 games played. So I look at it like this, like there's things like that are going to happen every year. I mean, the power play can be bad one year, the penalty kill can be really bad one year, but every year it's going to change. I think the power play is going to be fine. I think I don't see it as a personnel problem. I see it as just a setup problem. Like I think they sometimes try too much. They don't shoot enough. Their zone entries are terrible. They can't win the face-off. If they have the offensive zone draw, I felt like that was one of the biggest problems in the playoffs was they would lose the offensive zone draw, and that was it because they couldn't get back in the zone. So, as frustrating as it is because, just when they would do that, they dump the puck in, they can't get the forecheck going, whatever. It's tough. But I think overall, I think the power play is going to be a lot better. And when they were playing good, when they had the 9-game winning streak at the pause, the power play was heating up. I mean, they were having a really good power play to just go off, just to help them throughout the 9-game stretch they had there. The power play was starting to heat up, was starting to get better. I think if they would have continued into the rest of the season, it probably would have gotten increased more into the playoffs too. But sadly, that didn't happen. But again, I see the power play not really being as much of an issue going into this year because, as I said, it's not a personnel problem. I think it's just a setup.
Yeah, it was really frustrating to watch during that playoff bubble run where, again, a lot of it was system-based, not personnel-based. So, I mean, you see Kevin Hayes, was completely dominant for the majority of that bubble play. And then just, power play, they had him on at times in first unit, and it was a struggle. And so you don't look at him or Giroux even or Coots and be like, oh, yeah, you guys are terrible 5-on-5, so we're going to pretend that you can't. It's a lot of that it was weird. It was like they weren't really big on kind of causing pressure down low in particular. They were just really content to kind of play on the perimeter, pass it to defense. Yeah. Occasionally they'd take a shot, but not much screening out front. They didn't really adapt very well to teams' strategies defensively at breaking up what had worked for them in the regular season. So I think that they have lots of opportunity to do that. Farabee was one of the standouts in the playoff on limited power play time, and a big part of that because he actually drove the net and actually wasn't afraid to get into those tougher areas. So I think that they'll be fine at least league average next year, which is where they at least need to be back in that playoff conversation.
Right. Exactly, and I think that's going to do it for this edition of the Flyer Up podcast. And some closing remarks right here. I can definitely see right here, Chris, you are currently right now a walking advertisement. So do you want to express something a little bit about our merch store right now since you have some of the merch at hand?
So just to go off of it, I know I have the hoodie on right now with the 2 schmucks on it here. And then you also have the t-shirt as well. You can get that as well. And then there is also, for something that's very handy right now during COVID times, there's also the Flyer Up podcast mask as well. There's also a bunch of stuff, the stickers and all of that stuff too. So again, you can check that out. The link is in my Instagram. If you don't follow me on Instagram, it's at FlyerSammy93. I believe it's on Amadeo's Instagram, I think, and it's also on
the podcast Instagram as well.
Yeah, on the podcast Instagram. It's also on the link to my YouTube channel. You can check it out there as well. Which is just the same thing, FlyerSammy93. But again, we really do appreciate it if you guys do buy something from the store because it helps us out. And again, I think it's pretty cool that I have a hoodie with not only my face, but Amadeo's face on it as well.
Oh, God. Yeah, so that's going to do it for here at the Flyer Up podcast. Don't forget to follow us on our different social media pages at Flyer Up Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, Facebook, and even YouTube. Even though we don't really use the YouTube, I don't know why I keep bringing up the YouTube page. It's just habit at this point.
Just drop it.
And also, don't forget to go follow the Painted Lines. Subscribe to the Painted Lines YouTube channel as well. That'll be on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Don't forget to follow the Painted Lines. Don't forget to follow Flyers Fan Mania 93. Don't forget to follow me at TTP Sports on YouTube. My regular Twitter, Amadeo Gracia 98. Don't forget to follow Tyson on Twitter as well. Tyson, if you want to share your Twitter to people as well.
Yeah, I believe it's been a while since I've shared it. Quite know Tyson. So, I just did a piece recently on my finally top 31 or 32 because Seattle next year prospects for this upcoming draft. So, feel free to check that out in the lines. That's where you can find the majority of my work. So,
yeah, definitely. Don't forget to check out anything with the Painted Lines, and thank you for joining us for this episode here at the Fired Up Podcast. For people who weren't able to tune into the live stream, it'll be on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts and stuff like that. So don't worry about that. You'll be able to listen to it on there. For everyone here, thank you for joining the live stream. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fired Up Podcast. I'm your host, Amadeo Gracia. He is Chris Mayer. He is Tyson Quibel, and we will see you next time.